The HOA tried to block my ranch because of my fence, so I took control of their only road. They thought they could intimidate me with fines and threats. But what they didn't know was that I had a plan. When they came for my fence, I didn't just fight back. I did something they never saw coming. I didn't just stand my ground. I took their only road and sealed their fate. You won't believe what happened next. Welcome back to HOA Secrets Uncovered. Hey there, I'm Mark, and I've been living in this quiet suburban neighborhood for years. But little did they know, I wasn't just another homeowner following the rules. I'm here to bring you the stories that the HOA doesn't want you to hear. Today's story is a wild one. How I turned the tables on the HOA and took control of their only road. Let's dive right into it. The HOA tried to block my ranch because of my fence. So I took control of their only road. I could feel the tension in the air as I stood there, staring at the letter. The ink was bold, the words even bolder. Take down your fence, or face penalties. I looked at my ranch, the space I'd worked so hard to build, and a wave of frustration washed over me. I knew it wasn't just about the fence. No, it was bigger than that. It always is with the HOA, isn't it? They don't just want to control what's on your property. They want to control your life. My fence wasn't anything wild. It wasn't some neon monstrosity or a towering, gaudy eyesore. It was just a simple, colorful fence. Sure, it had a few bright colors, some red, a touch of yellow. But what was the harm in that? I wasn't breaking any laws, right? Yet, here I was, staring at the notice, feeling like I was under attack. I thought maybe I could reason with them. After all, I had been a decent homeowner. I paid my dues on time, kept my lawn in check, didn't cause tissue. Ubel! But the HOA? They had a different plan. I tried to remember the last time they had contacted me. Oh, that's right. It was when they told me my mailbox was an inch too high. The nerve. But this was different. This time they weren't being petty. They were being ruthless. They were coming for my ranch, and I wasn't going to stand for it. I went to the board meeting the next day, and that's where things started to take a turn. I'm no stranger to the HOA meetings, but this time, it felt different. When I walked into that room, I saw the president of the HOA sitting there with that smug smile of hers. You know, the one that never reaches her eyes. She was the one behind all of this. She glanced up at me for a split second, then looked back down at her papers, clearly pretending not to notice me. I didn't let that slide. "Excuse me," I said, my voice clear. Everyone in the room went quiet. "Can I ask what's really going on here? Why does my fence need to come down?" The room went silent. The president slowly looked up, her expression neutral, like she was trying to calculate her response. "Your fence doesn't fit the aesthetic of the neighborhood," she said flatly. "It's distracting." Distracting? To who? I thought. But I didn't say it. Instead, I smiled. "Well, I'll tell you what's distracting," I said. "Your rules." The room stiffened. The president's smile faltered for a second, but she quickly regained composure. "This isn't a discussion," she said coldly. "The board has made its decision. You'll either take it down, or you'll face consequences." Consequences. They always throw that word around like it means something. But the real consequence here was what they didn't expect. I wasn't just going to comply. As I sat there, listening to her drone on about the rules, I started thinking, how far could they push me? What if I just didn't follow their rules at all? What if I did something different? Then it hit me. The road. I knew it was theirs. The HOA owned the main road leading into the neighborhood. But what if I could change that? What if I could take control of that road? The HOA might think they controlled everything else, but they hadn't realized that the road wasn't as untouchable as they thought. After the meeting, I didn't just go home and sit on my hands. No, I went straight to the local records office. I pulled out every deed, every document, and every map I could get my hands on. I learned a lot in a short amount of time. I discovered something that made my heart race. The HOA's road? The one they claimed as their own? It wasn't theirs, not really. They had rights to it, but they didn't own it. I did, or at least I could, if I played my cards right. For the next few days I made a plan. I kept it simple: get the paperwork, get the land, take control. I wasn't going to fight with them about my fence anymore. No, this was bigger than that. This was about showing them they couldn't push me around. This was about revenge, but not the kind they expected. I knew the HOA didn't care about my fence. It was never about that. It was about control. And now? Now I had the control. I started the process. I signed the papers. I made the deal. And just like that, the road was mine. It felt good, but it was also nerve-wracking. What if they found out? What if they tried to stop me? I didn't care. I had taken their power away. And it was too late for them to stop me now. I smiled to myself as I thought about it. I didn't just beat them at their own game. I changed the game entirely. The next day, the HOA president showed up at my door. She didn't look too happy. "I know what you're doing," she said, her voice tight. I stared at her. "Oh, really?" I said, feeling a surge of satisfaction. "And what exactly am I doing?" "You can't. Just buy that road," she snapped. "That's not how this works." "Oh," I said, "I think you'll find it's exactly how this works. It's my road now." Her eyes widened in shock. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. I had won. The HOA had no idea what was coming next. The day the paperwork went through, I felt like I'd just won a battle. It was a small victory, but it was mine. I wasn't just some homeowner trying to follow their rules anymore. I was playing by my own rules. That afternoon, I stood by my fence, looking at the little piece of land I had worked so hard to protect. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the property. It felt peaceful, serene, but I knew better. The storm was coming. I could hear the tires crunching over gravel. It wasn't long before the HOA president pulled up to my driveway again, this time with a group of her little minions in tow. I smiled to myself. They had no idea what was coming. She got out of her car slowly, looking at me like I was some kind of enemy. Her face was stone cold, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She wasn't used to anyone standing up to her. "Well," she said, clearly trying to maintain control, "it seems like you've made your point." I crossed my arms, standing tall, feeling the weight of what I had done. "Oh, I think I've only just begun," I said calmly. She opened her mouth to say something, but then stopped herself. She glanced at her minions. They were all wearing the same stiff, disapproving expressions. The neighborhood was clearly divided. Some residents saw me as a troublemaker, others as a hero. The president cleared her throat and took a few steps forward. "You know, you can't just buy up our road," she said. "That road is essential to this neighborhood." I chuckled. "Funny, I thought it was mine now." I could feel her frustration rising. She wasn't used to anyone questioning her authority, much less going against her in such an unexpected way. She was the one who ran the show around here. The HOA had always held power, but now I had a piece of it. "You can't just do what you want," she said, almost pleading. "This is a community. You can't shut down access to it." Her words stung, not because they were true, but because I could see she was struggling to come to terms with the fact that she'd lost. She was used to winning, to crushing anyone who dared challenge her. But this was different. I stood my ground. You should have thought about that before you decided to attack my fence. She clenched her fists, but before she could speak again, I cut her off. Here's the deal, I said, stepping forward. You want the road back? Fine. You'll have to meet me halfway. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means I'll open up access again, but not on your terms. You'll have to make concessions. No more fines for my fence. No more restrictions on my property. And most importantly, you'll have to stop with these petty power trips. I'm done playing by your rules. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was calculating. We both knew she didn't have much of a choice. The road was crucial to the neighborhood, and I held the key. She didn't want to lose that access. But at what cost? She stared at me for a long moment, her face a mask of frustration and anger. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and almost threatening. You can't just get away with this. The HOA will never stand for it. I raised an eyebrow, a small smirk playing on my lips. I think you'll find the HOA has already stood for it. You've been ignoring the rules for too long. Now it's my turn. She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't interested in hearing any more of her empty threats. I think we're done here, I said. You know where to find me if you want to make a deal. With that, I turned my back on her and walked back to my fence, the one she had tried to tear down. As I heard her muttering something under her breath, I felt a sense of satisfaction. She had underestimated me, and now she was going to have to face the consequences of that mistake. The next few days were tense. I knew they wouldn't let this go easily. The HOA was like a predator, circling, waiting for the right moment to strike. I wasn't naive enough to think they'd just back off, but I wasn't going to make it easy for them either. That night, I sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker in the distance. The silence was almost too much to bear. It was the calm before the storm. I knew it. And then, just as I had expected, the storm hit. A letter arrived the next morning, just like the others. But this one was different. It wasn't just a warning or a fine. It was a full-on legal threat. They were suing me for access to the road. They were accusing me of trespassing on HOA property and demanding I reverse everything immediately. The arrogance. I read through the letter a few times, each word dripping with the HOA's usual brand of superiority. But this time, it didn't scare me. It made me smile. They were pushing too hard. They were desperate. I knew I had them right where I wanted them. The next day, I sent them my response. I didn't just sit back and wait for them to come at me. I struck first. I filed a counterclaim, citing their failure to follow the rules on 100 different fronts, fines that were never issued fairly, petty restrictions that had no legal standing, and most importantly, their attempts to bully me into submission. I wasn't just defending myself. I was going on the offense. And just like that, the power shifted. They didn't know what to do. For the first time, they were the ones on the defensive. And I had the power now. The road was mine. But what would happen next? Would they back down? Or was this just the beginning of an all-out war? The days after the legal threats started flying by like a blur. I knew the HOA wouldn't just roll over. They weren't used to being challenged, and now they were furious. But what they didn't realize was they were dealing with someone who wasn't afraid to play the game, no matter how dirty it got. The first few days of their silence were unsettling. It was the calm before the storm, and I had to keep my head straight. I didn't want to get too comfortable. I knew they were brewing something, trying to figure out how to hit back. But what could they do? The road was mine. They couldn't take it back without making themselves look even worse. I was pacing back and forth in my living room when the next knock on my door came. It was a soft tap, like they were trying to be polite. But I knew better. The HOA didn't do anything politely. I opened the door, and there she stood, the president, her face as hard as granite. Behind her were two men I didn't recognize. Their suits screamed corporate muscle, lawyers. I could already feel my blood pressure rising. "Good morning," she said, her voice smooth but laced with tension. "We need to talk." I stepped back to let them in. As they walked past me, I could sense their eyes scanning my home, sizing up every detail. I didn't care. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. They could judge me all they wanted, but it wasn't going to change anything. "We're not here to discuss your fence or the road," she said, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. The two lawyers followed her lead, positioning themselves like they were preparing for a battle. "We're here to negotiate." Negotiate? I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. I didn't realize I was the one who needed to negotiate. The president's lips pressed into a thin line. She was doing everything she could to maintain her composure, but I could see the anger boiling just below the surface. "Here's the deal," she said, her eyes narrowing. "You've made your point, but this has gone too far. We can't have this dragging out. It's bad for the neighborhood, for everyone." I crossed my arms. "And what do you want from me? You want me to tear down my fence, give up control of the road? Is that your deal?" She took a deep breath as if gathering her thoughts. The two lawyers remained quiet, waiting for her to speak. "We don't want to take the road back," she said, her voice suddenly softer. "But we need you to back off. You've made a scene. You're disrupting the neighborhood. If you do that, we'll forget about the fines, the legal action, all of it." I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. "So, what you're offering is for me to do nothing, and you'll leave me alone?" Her gaze hardened. "We need to restore order. The HOA has a reputation to uphold, and we want you to be a part of that." I leaned back in my chair. The tension was thick, and I could feel the pressure building. They thought they could intimidate me into backing down, but they had underestimated me, and now they were going to pay for it. "What makes you think I want to be a part of that?" I asked calmly. "The HOA has been nothing but a thorn in my side since day one. You've made my life miserable, and now you want me to help you fix it?" The room was silent for a moment. I could feel the weight of her frustration. She had thought I'd cave in, that I'd be desperate to end this drama. But she was wrong. "Look," she said, clearly struggling to maintain control. "We can work this out. But only if you agree to compromise." I thought about it for a second. What would it take for me to give up? What price could they offer that would make me forget everything they'd done? There was nothing. "I'm not here to compromise," I said, standing up. "I'm here to win." Her eyes flashed with anger. "This isn't a game, you know." "Oh, I know," I said, my voice low and steady. "But you've treated it like one, and now you've lost." She stared at me for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if I was bluffing or if I was serious. I could see her fighting to keep her cool, but I could tell she was getting close to snapping. Finally, she stood up, signaling her lawyers to follow. "We'll be back," she said coldly, turning on her heel. "This isn't over." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. I knew the game was in my hands now. As they left, I stood by the door, watching them walk down the driveway. My heart was racing, but not because I was scared. No, I felt alive. I was playing the game on my terms now, and there was no way I was going to lose. That night, As I sat in my living room, I thought about what had just happened. The negotiations were a joke. They had no idea what they were up against. They thought they could push me around, scare me into submission. But I wasn't that person anymore. And yet, despite everything, I knew the fight wasn't over. This was just the beginning. They had no idea how far I was willing to go. The next day, I walked out to the road. The sun was setting, and the light was just right, casting long shadows over the asphalt. It was the perfect time to strike again. I knew they were watching. I walked to the edge of the road, looking out at the neighborhood. My neighborhood. The one they thought they controlled. But now it was mine. The next few days felt like walking through a fog. The HOA president and her lawyers had left my house in a HOA. Their threats hanging in the air like smoke. But I knew this wasn't over. No, this was far from over. They weren't going to back down just because I'd played my cards well. The HOA was a beast, used to getting its way. And when you've been a bully for so long, you don't know how to deal with someone who won't flinch. I sat at my kitchen table, my mind racing through the possibilities. I could feel the weight of the road in my hands, figuratively and literally. They had underestimated me. They thought the legal threats would break me, but it didn't. It only made me more determined to go the distance. The letters, the fines, the court threats, they didn't scare me anymore. What scared me now was the realization that I was dealing with people who were willing to do anything to protect their power. And that's what made them dangerous. That afternoon, I went out to the road again, just to check on things. The quiet street looked like any other suburban road, perfectly paved, lined with neatly trimmed trees, and houses in every shade of beige and brown. But I knew better. Beneath the surface, it was all a game. And right now, I was in control of the board. As I walked along the edge of the road, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had turned the tables on them. For the first time in ages, the HOA didn't have the upper hand. But there was one thing I hadn't accounted for: how far they'd go to take it back. Later that evening, the phone rang. I didn't even need to check the caller ID. I knew who it was. "Mr. Last Name," came the voice on the other end. It was the HOA president again, sounding cooler than before. But I could hear the edge in her tone. "We've been thinking about our last conversation." I crossed my arms, leaning back in my chair. "Oh, really?" "We've decided to take a different approach," she said, each word carefully chosen. "We're going to escalate things." Escalate things? What did she mean by that? Before I could respond, she continued, her voice now dripping with thinly veiled menace. "We're going to make sure the neighborhood knows what you've done. We'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." I wasn't sure if she was threatening me or just trying to scare me, but it didn't matter. What was she going to do? Tell the neighbors that I had stood up for myself? That I wasn't afraid to fight back? If anything, that would make me a hero, not a villain. I decided to push back a little. "So, what's the plan? You're going to turn the entire neighborhood against me?" I asked, barely holding back a laugh. "Good luck with that." "We'll see," she replied, her voice cold now. "But this isn't over. We'll make sure of that." The line went dead, and I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone. They thought they could play dirty? Fine. I'd been playing dirty from the start. But I wasn't just going to sit back and wait for them to come after me. No, I was going to take the fight to them. The next morning, I got up early. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the lawn. I grabbed my keys and headed out to my car, a plan already forming in my head. I wasn't going to wait for them to come to me. I was going to turn their own game against them. I drove around the neighborhood, taking my time. I knew what I was looking for, anything I could use to my advantage. The HOA had always prided itself on keeping everything perfect, on maintaining the illusion of control. But I knew the cracks were there. I just had to find them. It didn't take long. I pulled into a cul-de-sac on the other side of the neighborhood. It was quiet here, and the houses were even more pristine than the others. But then I saw it. A mailbox that was too high, just by a few inches, but still out of code. It was a small thing, but in the world of the HOA, it was enough to be used as leverage. I took a picture. I wasn't done yet. I kept driving, looking for more. A front lawn that wasn't quite trimmed the way the rules demanded. A house with a flagpole that was too tall. I gathered it all, every violation I could find. The next step was simple. I printed everything out, organized it into neat little piles, letters, photographs, official-looking documents. I was going to hit them where it hurt. By the time the sun began to set, I had everything I needed. I packed it all into an envelope and took it to the local office, the one where the HOA members were supposed to be meeting in a few days. It wasn't much, but I knew it would be enough to rattle their cages. I left the envelope on the desk. Just one simple note inside. Here's what I found. You can't pretend your hands are clean anymore. I didn't stick around to watch their reaction. I didn't need to. I knew what would happen next. The HOA was about to find out that their perfect world wasn't so perfect after all. I sat at home, waiting. I didn't know what the next move would be, but I knew I had pushed them to the edge. And now, I was going to make them face the consequences of their own rules. As the evening wore on, I could almost feel the tension in the air. What would they do? Would they back down? Or was I about to witness their final desperate move? The next morning felt like the calm before a thunderstorm. I woke up early, feeling a mix of excitement and tension buzzing in my veins. I had done what I needed to do, and now the ball was in their court. The HOA was in for a rude awakening, and I was more than ready to see how they would react. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee, scanning the street outside. The neighborhood was still. Quiet. Too quiet. Every house looked the same. Perfectly manicured lawns, white picket fences, and a whole lot of nothing underneath. But beneath that surface, I knew the truth. The power struggles, the petty rules, and now they were going to feel the weight of their own games. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an anonymous source in the neighborhood, someone who had been following my little rebellion. "Did you see the HOA meeting last night? They were livid." I couldn't help but grin. It was happening. They were unraveling. The message continued. "They've got a list of violations, trying to make you look like the villain. But word is, they're looking for a scapegoat, something to distract the neighborhood from their own issues." I chuckled, shaking my head. The irony of it all. They thought they could use me as a distraction? Well, if they wanted to make me the villain, I'd gladly play the part. But I wasn't going down alone. They were going to drag everyone into this mess. Everyone who had ever bent the rules to fit their agenda. I didn't need to wait much longer. Around noon, the HOA president knocked on my door again. But this time, there was something different in her demeanor. She wasn't storming in, demanding I fix things. No, this time she looked defeated. Her usual smirk was gone, replaced with a tense, tight-lipped expression. "Mr. Last name," she began, trying to sound authoritative, but it was clear she was holding back. "We need to discuss your actions." I stood at the door, letting the silence stretch between us. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Not after everything they'd put me through. I wasn't afraid anymore. "You're here to talk, huh?" I said, crossing my arms. "I thought you were done with that last night." Her face twitched, but she didn't snap back. Instead, she glanced behind her, where two more HOA members were standing. The weight of the situation was heavy in the air, thick with unspoken words. "We're offering a settlement," she said, almost as if she was forcing the words out. "We'll drop the charges. The road access can be reopened. In exchange, you need to make amends." "Amends?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You want me to apologize? After everything you've done?" "No," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "We want to move forward for the sake of the neighborhood. We'll drop the fines and we'll overlook the road issue. But you need to give up control. We need to fix this mess." Her offer hung in the air, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. She wasn't offering me a solution. She was trying to get me to surrender. She was hoping I'd give up the power I'd just taken. But that wasn't happening. "You know," I said slowly, "I'm not interested in your settlement. I didn't start this to fix things for you. I started this to take control, and I'm not going to hand that over." Her eyes darkened. "You don't understand. This is bigger than you. The HOA can make things very difficult for you." I smiled. "You've been making things difficult for me for a long time. How do you think that feels? I'm just returning the favor." The moment stretched, the tension so thick that I could almost taste it. I could tell she was getting angrier by the second, but I wasn't backing down. "Not now." "Let's be clear," I said, my voice cold but steady. "I'm not giving you control of the road. It's mine. And as far as your so-called settlement, you can take it and shove it." I saw her clenched fists. She wasn't used to being talked to like that, not by anyone, certainly not by a homeowner she thought she could push around. "Fine," she snapped. "If you want to play, I'm it this way, we'll make sure it's a public issue. The community deserves to know who you really are. You've disrupted everything. This will be your legacy." I couldn't help but laugh. "You think I'm scared of that? I've been living in your shadow for far too long. The truth is, you're the ones who have been running this neighborhood like a dictatorship. I'm just calling you out on it." She turned to walk away, but I wasn't done yet. "Oh," I added, "and don't forget, I still have a few little surprises up my sleeve." She froze, her back to me. "What are you talking about?" "Just a little reminder," I said, my voice a little too calm for her liking. "You might have power, but I've got leverage." Without waiting for a response, I closed the door. I could hear her muttering outside, but I didn't care. As the door clicked shut, I stood there for a moment, savoring the feeling. They had no idea what they were up against. But I did. And the more they pushed, the more I was going to pull. The HOA had crossed the line, and now they had no idea how far I was willing to take this. But I wasn't going to let it slide. Not now, not ever. As the night settled in, I knew something else was coming. I wasn't just going to sit back and wait for them to retaliate. No, I was going to turn the tables once more. What could I do next? It was only a few days after that heated exchange with the HOA president, but already I could feel the momentum shifting. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable. People were talking, some whispering behind closed doors, others outright discussing the chaos. It was like I had thrown a stone into a pond, and the ripples were growing. The HOA was no longer just a faceless organization sending out fines. No, now they had a public enemy, a target, and that target was me. But as the whispers grew louder, I knew something else was brewing. The HOA wasn't going to let this go without a fight. Not this time. They had tried to intimidate me, tried to push me into submission, but I wasn't going to bend, not for anyone, Ted. That night, after the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat at my kitchen table, sorting through more paperwork. I was deep in thought when a knock came at my door. It was strange. Late in the evening, and with everything that had been happening, I wasn't expecting anyone. But I wasn't scared either. If they thought they could intimidate me, they had another thing coming. I stood up and walked to the door, opening it slowly. Standing there was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, sharp suit, dark sunglasses, even though it was nighttime. He had that look about him, the kind you only see in movies when the villain's about to make his entrance. He was holding an envelope. "Mr. Last name?" he said, his voice low and controlled. "Yeah, that's me," I replied, still sizing him up. Without another word, he handed me the envelope. "This is from the HOA." I didn't even have to open it to know what was inside. Another threat, another set of rules they wanted me to follow. But this was different. I could feel the weight of it in my hands. "Tell them I'm not interested," I said, and started to close the door. He stepped forward, blocking it with his foot. His expression didn't change. "You should read it," he said, his tone colder than I expected. I hesitated, then took the envelope from him. Inside, the letter was simple, but to the point. It was a demand for me to return control of the road to the HOA or face more legal action. It was signed by the board, but what caught my eye was the final line. "Failure to comply will result in immediate public exposure of your violations, including all reported complaints." So, that was their play. The HOA was pulling out all the stops now. They were threatening to expose every tiny imperfection I'd ever made, every violation they could scrape up from my past. They weren't just trying to take the road back. They were trying to destroy me in front of the entire neighborhood. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. They weren't playing fair anymore. This wasn't about rules. This was about public humiliation, about turning the neighborhood against me. But they didn't know me. They didn't know what I was capable of when I was backed into a corner. I looked at the man in front of me. "You tell them something for me," I said, my voice steady but full of fire. "I'm not scared, not anymore. And if they want to make it personal, I'll give them a fight they won't forget." He didn't say a word, just nodded and turned to leave. As he walked away, I slammed the door shut behind him. I could feel the heat of anger rising in my chest. They thought they could intimidate me. They thought they could break me. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I sat down at my kitchen table again, the letter in front of me, staring at the words. For a moment I was silent, the weight of it sinking in. But then I made a decision. They wanted a war? Fine. I was ready. I wasn't going to just sit here and let them turn my life upside down. I was going to expose them, all of them, every last one of their petty, ridiculous rules. I had the upper hand now, and I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers. The next morning I grabbed my phone and began doing exactly what the HOA didn't expect. I went public. I started recording. Not just the letter, not just my side of the story. No, I was going to show the neighborhood what kind of people they were dealing with, the way they treated homeowners like me, the way they thought they could control everything from the color of your fence to the height of your mailbox. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to expose everything. I recorded video after video, detailing my interactions with the HOA, showing every piece of evidence I had. I posted it online, making sure it reached as many yes as possible. I wasn't just talking to a few neighbors anymore. I was talking to an entire community, an entire city, and I wasn't backing down. As the videos went live, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I knew this was risky, that the HOA would come after me even harder. But I didn't care anymore. They had gone too far. It wasn't just about a fence or a road anymore. It was about standing up to a system that thought it could crush people without consequence. The first few comments rolled in almost immediately. People were watching. They were listening. Some were angry, some were shocked, but one thing was clear. The HOA had lost control of the narrative. I was in the driver's seat now, and they were scrambling to catch up. I kept watching the numbers tick up. Views, shares, comments. The community was starting to turn. They didn't want to be under the thumb of the HOA anymore, and now they were seeing the truth. It wasn't just about enforcing rules, it was about power, and I had taken that power back. But as I watched the responses flood in, one thought kept nagging at me. The HOA wasn't going to let this go. They were going to retaliate, and when they did, I needed to be ready. The backlash was immediate, and it came fast. I had expected the HOA to retaliate, but not like this. Within hours of posting the videos, my phone was blowing up. Calls, messages, notifications from neighbors, even strangers who had gotten hold of my story. The HOA had been exposed for what it truly was, a group of power-hungry bullies who thrived on control and submission. But what they didn't expect was how quickly the neighborhood turned on them. People were tired of their petty restrictions, their fines, their ridiculous rules, and now they knew the truth. The next morning, I was woken up to a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, wondering if it was the HOA trying to shut me down again. "Mr. Last Name?" A voice on the other end was calm, but the undertone of frustration was undeniable. "We've seen your videos. This is getting out of hand." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. "Is that so?" I said, trying to keep my voice level even though I could feel the excitement bubbling beneath the surface. The voice on the other end continued, clearly holding back. "You've caused a lot of chaos in the neighborhood. People are talking, and we need you to take those videos down." I could feel the smirk forming on my face. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I do something wrong? Was I not supposed to tell everyone what you've been up to?" There was a long pause before the voice replied, "This is your last warning. You need to stop. You don't know who you're messing with." I leaned back against the headboard, feeling a rush of confidence. "Oh, I think I know exactly who I'm messing with. And it's not you." I hung up the phone without another word. For a moment I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. I had won. They were losing control and I had turned the tables. But I couldn't stop there. Not now. Not when I was this close. The neighborhood was buzzing. People were talking. The HOA had sent out flyers, claiming I was spreading misinformation and threatening to sue me for defamation. But the more they talked, the more they alienated themselves. People were starting to see the hypocrisy. They were starting to see what I had seen all along. The HOA wasn't about enforcing rules. It was about maintaining control, no matter the cost. I wasn't the villain in this story. The HOA was. That night, I received a knock on my door. This time, I wasn't surprised. I knew exactly who it was before I even opened it. The HOA president stood there, looking like she had been through a war. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair disheveled. It was clear she hadn't been sleeping much. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with anger. I crossed my arms. "I'm listening." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, and the two other board members flanked her, standing in my living room like soldiers ready for battle. It was a power play, but this time they were walking into my territory. "You've caused a lot of problems for us," she said, barely able to contain her frustration. "You've ruined everything we've worked for. People are turning against us. You're the one who's out of control here." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a sense of satisfaction. Out of control? No. I'm just exposing the truth. You're the ones who've been controlling everything for far too long, and now you're losing. She gritted her teeth. "You've done enough damage. You need to take down those videos. You need to stop making us the bad guys." "Stop?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You think you can just sweep everything under the rug? You think you can silence me now that the truth is out?" "It's too late. People see you for what you really are." I could see her struggling to keep her composure. She was breaking, and I knew it. The power had shifted. She was losing control of the narrative, and there was nothing she could do to take it back. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice shaking. I could tell she was desperate. She wasn't used to being the one on the receiving end of threats. She wasn't used to being powerless. But now, she was looking at me, waiting for me to make my move. "I want respect," I said, my voice cold and firm. "I want you to understand that I'm not afraid of you. I'm not going to back down. And I'm not going to let you push me around anymore." She stood there, staring at me for a long moment, as if trying to read my intentions. Finally she spoke, her voice quieter now. "We're offering you a deal. If you agree to take down the videos and stop this, we'll let you have the road. We'll stop with the fines and the harassment. We'll call it even." I let out a short laugh. "Is that what you think this is? You think you can buy me off? No, the road is mine. I'm not giving it up, and I'm not stopping until everyone knows the truth about you." She looked defeated, her shoulders slumping as she glanced at the other members of the board. They said nothing, just stood there, looking like they were waiting for her to make the final call. It was over. I had won. She turned to leave, but before she walked out the door, she stopped and looked back at me. "This isn't the end. You'll regret this." I smiled. "We'll see about that." As she left, I stood by the door, a sense of victory filling me. They had pushed me to the edge, but I had turned it around. They thought they could control me, silence me, but in the end, they had only made themselves the villains, and I had become the hero of my own story. Now, the real question was, what was the HOA going to do next? Would they finally give up, or would they keep coming after me?